They laughed at her at a party because, years after school, the smartest one had become a waitress. But first, remember to subscribe to our channel so we can keep sharing incredible stories. At a lively party, in a cozy upscale bar in New York City, Olivia moved gracefully between tables, balancing trays of drinks and appetizers. The low hum of conversations and laughter filled the room, but as she approached a familiar group of faces, the noise felt sharper, directed. Olivia had been the smartest student in her high school. She'd earned awards, scholarships, and had been voted most likely to succeed in their yearbook. Yet here she was, years later, serving drinks to those very same classmates. One of them, a tall, confident man named Eric, leaned back in his chair, giving her a look that mixed disbelief and amusement. "Olivia, is that you?" he said, loud enough for others to hear. She smiled politely, nodding. "Wow," he continued, eyes wide with feigned surprise. "Weren't you the brightest in the class? How'd you end up here?" Some of his friends laughed, murmuring comments about how life was full of surprises and asking what had happened to her promising future. Olivia met their questioning gazes, feeling the sting of their judgment. She could see what they saw, a failure who had fallen far short of her potential, but there was more they couldn't see, something that wasn't as simple as a resume or paycheck. "Come on, Olivia," Amy, an old classmate and one-time friend, prodded. "How did you go from being the smartest to this?" Olivia held her tray a little tighter, taking a deep breath. Despite their dismissive comments, she didn't flinch. Instead, she looked directly at each of them with a calm, unbothered gaze. A part of her wanted to explain herself right then, to reveal why she was there and how her life had led her in a direction that they wouldn't understand. But tonight wasn't the night to give everything away. With a soft smile, she answered simply, "I guess things aren't always what they seem." As she walked away to serve other tables, she could feel their eyes on her, a mixture of curiosity and pity. None of them knew that tonight was the beginning of a significant new phase for her, a night that would, very soon, reveal far more than they ever expected. Olivia moved through the room, feeling the weight of their stares lingering on her. As she served a few other tables, she could still hear the faint, mocking laughter from her old classmates. Moments later, Amy, her high school friend turned rival, found her again at the bar where she was refilling a tray. "So," Amy said, leaning in with a drink in hand, "aren't you the least bit embarrassed? I mean, you had the highest grades of anyone in school, and now you're—" She trailed off, giving Olivia a once-over with a condescending smirk. "It just seems like you've settled for so much less than you deserve." Olivia glanced at Amy, holding her gaze steadily, and then returned her attention to preparing her tray. The comments stirred memories she had long put to rest. Late-night study sessions, graduation speeches, promises she'd made to herself about changing the world. But as she'd come to realize over the years, ambition and success weren't always linear. She had chosen a different path, one that didn't fit the traditional mold of achievement, and that was something her old friends wouldn't understand. She thought about all she'd experienced in the past year. Being a waitress had brought her face to face with people from all walks of life. The stories she'd heard, the connections she'd made with people who felt unseen by society, had reshaped her understanding of success. Each night's shift had added layers to her life that no amount of academic accolades could replace. Amy continued, a hint of satisfaction in her tone. "I mean, I guess we all have to make compromises, right?" Her comment felt like a final, victorious jab, as if Olivia's choice to be there validated Amy's own narrow view of success. Olivia almost laughed at the irony, but held it in. With a calm, confident smile, she answered simply, "Some compromises are worth making." But as she was about to turn away, a familiar voice cut through the noise of the crowd. one that immediately brought back a flood of old memories and a sense of reassurance. She turned, realizing that her former high school mentor, Jacob, was also in attendance. He walked over with a gentle, knowing smile and greeted her warmly. "Olivia," he said, giving her a look that seemed to understand everything. "I always knew you were one to follow your own path." His presence felt like a much-needed anchor amid the dismissive comments around her, and she knew this conversation would become a turning point. Jacob's warm gaze softened Olivia's tension as he settled beside her at the bar. "So, how have you been, Olivia?" he asked, his voice carrying genuine interest. His presence took her back to days in the library, where he'd encouraged her to ask questions and challenge herself beyond grades and accolades. She felt a wave of relief as he looked at her, not with judgment but with curiosity and respect. "Funny seeing you here," he said, glancing over his shoulder at the group of old classmates. "Some things don't change, do they?" he added with a knowing smile, having caught their cold remarks toward her. Olivia laughed quietly, shaking her head. "It's interesting," she replied. "Everyone's so sure they know how things turned out." She paused, then decided to let him in on the truth, knowing he'd understand. "Jacob, I chose this job, and I've been using it to work on something I believe in." Jacob leaned in, intrigued. Olivia explained that she'd been quietly developing a project aimed at empowering underprivileged youth, people who felt invisible, much like the many patrons she met during her shifts. "Every night, I meet people with stories that would change the way anyone here thinks," she said, gesturing slightly toward her classmates. "I realized that I couldn't help people from a distance. I had to be close enough to understand them first." Jacob's face lit up with admiration. "Olivia, that's remarkable. I knew you were always someone who'd see beyond the usual paths." He encouraged her to share her vision further. She explained her project in more depth, describing her dream of a foundation focused on providing educational opportunities for those who had none, helping them see that intelligence and success were not reserved for the elite. "They look at me now and see a failure," Olivia admitted with a shrug, glancing at her classmates. "But they have no idea that everything I'm doing now is laying the groundwork for something bigger." Jacob placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "Remember, Olivia, success isn't about titles. It's about purpose. And I think you're already on your way to achieving something extraordinary." As he walked away to rejoin his friends, Olivia's resolve solidified. Tonight, she would reveal her truth. For the first time, she wanted her former classmates to understand that success could be defined on her own terms, with a purpose far greater than they could imagine. With a newfound confidence, Olivia straightened up and returned to her table of former classmates, their laughter subsiding as she approached. Eric raised an eyebrow, sensing she was about to say something more than just take orders. Taking a steady breath, she began, "I know what you all think of me right now, that I failed, or that I settled for less. But you've got it all wrong." Her voice was calm, but it carried a strength that caught their attention. "I chose to work here. It's given me access to people and stories that I never would have known otherwise. People who've faced challenges far tougher than the ones we talked about back in school." Amy gave a skeptical glance, her mouth half open as if to question Olivia again. But Olivia continued before she could interrupt. "Every night I hear from people who are ignored, who've been overlooked by society. I realized that I couldn't help them from the successful distance we were all aiming for in high school, so I got closer." The table fell silent. For the first time, her classmates saw something beyond the familiar face of the smart girl they once knew. She could see their skepticism starting to fade as curiosity took its place. "This job has given me insight into what it really means to have purpose," Olivia explained, "and it's led me to start my own foundation. I've been working on it in my free time, building something that will help young people who don't have access to education or opportunities. They're people with so much potential that's too often ignored by people who think success only looks one way. Amy's expression softened, her dismissive smirk replaced by a look of surprise. So you're helping people? Like through an actual foundation? Olivia nodded. That's right. I'm using my skills, my time, and even my work here to understand them and build something real for them. Because to me, that's what success looks like. One by one, the old group began to lower their defenses, shifting in their seats as they absorbed what she was saying. For the first time, they seemed to recognize that Olivia had found a path far more meaningful than anything they could have imagined for her. As she left the table, Olivia felt lighter. Her heart pounded, but not with nerves. This time, it was a feeling of pride, of knowing she had spoken her truth. And as she returned to her work, she noticed a few lingering glances from her classmates, each one thoughtful, as if seeing her in a new light. A few months after that night, Olivia's foundation officially launched, quickly gaining traction as her story spread across the community. Her old classmates saw her featured in local news articles and on social media, her name tied to an ambitious vision that was already changing lives. The foundation offered free tutoring, mentorship programs, and skill-building workshops to disadvantaged youth, providing tools to help them pursue dreams that previously felt out of reach. Amy, Eric, and several others who had mocked her at the party followed her progress from afar, struck by the contrast between their assumptions and the remarkable impact Olivia was now making. Each update seemed to remind them of the night they'd misjudged her, revealing just how little they had understood. One day, as she was wrapping up a workshop at the Foundation's headquarters, Olivia was approached by Amy. With an apologetic smile, Amy explained that she'd been inspired by Olivia's courage to step outside traditional paths and follow her true purpose. "I never realized how narrow my view was," Amy admitted, glancing around at the colorful posters and busy classrooms filled with young students eager to learn. "You've created something that I couldn't have even imagined back then." Olivia smiled, her tone warm and forgiving. "None of us have the whole picture," she replied, "but we have the power to build something meaningful when we stop trying to live up to everyone else's expectations." As they talked, more classmates reached out, some offering donations, others asking how they could get involved. Olivia's foundation became a hub for more than just education. It sparked a shift in her community's values. Her friends, family, and even old acquaintances began to volunteer their time, helping the youth in ways they never thought they could. Olivia often thought back to that night at the party, the laughs, the doubts, and the questions they'd thrown at her. But now they served as reminders of how powerful it was to remain true to herself. Her journey wasn't about proving anyone wrong. It was about building something that would last, something with the potential to empower a new generation. And as she watched her students grow and achieve dreams of their own, Olivia knew that she had, in every way that mattered, achieved her version of success.